Tonight, there is a place that most people never notice, a quiet pocket of green hidden behind the noise, the pain, and the urgency of a battlefield hospital. It is a place where footsteps soften, where even sorrow seems to lower its voice, and where something fragile continues to grow while the world nearby is breaking. This story begins there, in the space between suffering and hope, where a small garden waits patiently to be seen. Before we continue, take a moment to settle in. If you enjoy calm, immersive stories like this one, please gently tap like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're listening from. Maybe it's evening in the U.S., late night in Europe, or early morning somewhere else in the world. What time is it where you are right now? Your presence here matters. Now, take a slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. Allow the outside world to fade just a little as we step quietly into the story. The hospital never truly slept. Even in the deepest hours of night, there was always a distant murmur, boots moving across worn floors, the soft clink of metal instruments, the low hum of generators breathing life into the building. The air carried a mix of antiseptic sharpness and something heavier, something human. It was the scent of endurance, of people holding on. Behind the hospital, beyond a rusted service door rarely used, there was a narrow path. Most never noticed it. It curved gently, as if unsure of itself, bordered by cracked stones and stubborn weeds. Following it felt like stepping out of time. Each footfall grew quieter, the sounds of urgency fading until only the wind remained, brushing softly against leaves. At the end of the path stood the garden. It was not large. It was not planned. Nothing about it followed rules, yet it breathed with quiet determination. Pale flowers leaned toward the moonlight, their petals trembling slightly in the cool air. Vines climbed broken fencing, choosing growth over despair. The soil was dark and rich, turned again and again by unseen hands, hands that needed this place as much as it needed them. From here, the hospital looked different. Its harsh light softened through branches and leaves. The cries and commands became distant echoes, as if the garden itself were absorbing the pain, holding it gently so it could not spill everywhere. In this hidden space, time slowed. Breaths deepened. Thoughts wandered less urgently. Someone had placed a small bench near the center, its wood smoothed by use. Sitting there, one could feel the contrast clearly, the weight of the battlefield behind, and the fragile promise of life all around. The garden did not erase suffering. It did not pretend the wounds were not real, but it offered something else, a pause, a reminder that even here growth was possible. The night breeze carried the scent of earth and leaves, steady and grounding. Above, the stars watched silently, indifferent yet constant. And in that stillness, the garden waited, ready to offer its quiet comfort to anyone who found their way to it. As the night deepened, the garden seemed to breathe more slowly, as if matching its rhythm to those who entered it. The leaves whispered softly when the wind passed through, a sound like distant water, steady and reassuring. Somewhere nearby, an insect hummed, then fell silent again, leaving behind a gentle stillness that felt intentional, almost protective. Those who found their way here often arrived without realizing why they needed it. Their steps were cautious at first, as if unsure whether they were allowed to rest. The weight they carried did not vanish when they crossed into the garden, but it shifted. It settled differently in their bodies, less sharp, less demanding. Shoulders dropped, hands unclenched. The ground beneath the bench was slightly uneven, shaped by seasons of rain and careful tending. Sitting there, One could feel the coolness of the night rise through the soles of the feet, grounding and calm. The air held a faint sweetness from blossoms that had no reason to bloom so close to suffering, yet did so anyway. Their scent lingered gently, not overpowering, just enough to remind the senses that beauty could still exist quietly. From time to time a distant sound slipped through, the faint call of a voice, the echo of hurried movement inside the hospital. But here, those sounds arrived softened, as if filtered through layers of leaves and patience. The garden did not shut out the world, it simply asked it to be quieter. Moonlight traced silver lines across petals and stones, revealing small details that daylight often ignored. A single leaf, torn at the edge, continued to hold firm to its stem. A young shoot pressed upward through the soil, fragile yet determined. These small signs spoke without words, offering a kind of reassurance that did not need explanation. In this place, memories tended to surface gently, not the sharp ones, but the softer fragments. Morning light through a window, the feel of clean water on tired hands, the sound of someone breathing peacefully nearby. The garden seemed to invite these thoughts, holding space for them without judgment. Time passed differently here. Minutes stretched, then loosened their grip. The night did not hurry anyone away. It simply waited, patient and calm, allowing the garden to do what it did best, offer quiet strength, one breath at a time. By the time the sky began to shift into its deeper shades of blue, the garden felt almost alive in its listening. It absorbed footsteps, sighs, and unspoken thoughts with equal care. Each sound that entered seemed to soften, as though the leaves themselves were leaning in, offering attention without demand. A faint path wound between clusters of plants, worn smooth by careful passing. It was narrow enough to encourage slowness, guiding anyone who walked it to place each step with intention. The soil, still cool from the night, held onto the memory of rain that had fallen days before. Its scent rose quietly, earthy and grounding, filling the lungs with something steady and real. Somewhere near the back, a small water container caught droplets from a simple collection system. Every so often, a drop fell, creating a soft rhythmic sound. It was neither loud nor distracting, just a gentle reminder of movement, of continuity. In a place shaped by urgency and interruption, this slow, predictable rhythm felt deeply comforting. The plants here were mismatched, gathered over time rather than planned all at once. Herbs grew beside wildflowers, their leaves releasing faint fragrances when brushed by the wind. A small tree, still young, stretched its branches outward with quiet optimism. Its leaves trembled slightly, catching the light, as if practicing how to hold the future. Standing in the garden, it was easy to forget the weight of uniforms, schedules, and relentless decisions. The body remembered how to be still. Breathing became something noticed again, something felt. Each inhale carried cool air. Each exhale released tension that had been held too long. Even the darkness felt gentle here. Shadows gathered at the edges but never fully closed in. They remained soft, shaped by moonlight and leaves, more like resting places than threats. The garden did not promise answers. It did not pretend that everything would be all right. But it offered something quieter and perhaps more important, a sense that it was okay for a moment to simply exist. As the night continued, the garden remained open, patient, and quietly strong, holding space for those who needed it most. As the hours moved forward, the garden held its calm like a steady hand. The air cooled just a little more, brushing against skin with a softness that invited deeper breaths. Dew began to form along the edges of leaves, tiny beads catching what little light there was, reflecting it back in muted glimmers. Each droplet felt like a quiet promise, small and complete on its own. Near the fence, the plants grew closer together, creating a natural shelter. Standing there, one could feel slightly hidden, protected not by walls, but by living things choosing to grow side by side. The faint rustle of leaves overhead created a gentle rhythm, like a lullaby made by the earth itself. It asked nothing in return, only presence. The ground remembered every footstep that had passed through. Imprints softened over time, smoothed by wind and careful tending. Nothing here stayed sharp for long. Even the broken stones along the path had begun to settle into the soil, their edges dulled, their weight accepted. The garden had a way of taking what was harsh and slowly reshaping it into something bearable. Some nights clouds drifted across the sky, dimming the moonlight. When that happened, the garden did not disappear. It simply grew quieter, more inward. Shapes blurred gently, encouraging trust in other senses. The cool air on the face, the scent of damp earth, the subtle warmth still held in the ground from the day before. In this stillness, thoughts that once felt heavy began to loosen, not because they were solved, but because they were no longer pressed so tightly against the heart. The garden allowed them to float, to settle where they needed to. It reminded anyone who stood there that rest was not a reward, it was necessity. Time continued its slow unfolding. The hospital behind remained busy, awake, and burdened. But here, in this hidden space, the night offered something rare and precious, permission to pause, to breathe, and to be held by quiet growth. Just before the night reached its deepest point, the garden felt especially still, as if it were holding its breath along with the world. The sounds from the hospital faded even further, reduced to a distant pulse that no longer demanded attention. In their place, the softer sounds came forward, the gentle shift of leaves, the quiet settling of soil, the almost imperceptible movement of life continuing its slow work. The bench, cool to the touch now, seemed to invite longer stays. Sitting there, one could feel the faint texture of the wood beneath tired hands, smoothed by time and care. It was not polished, but it was kind. The bench carried the quiet imprint of many moments of rest, absorbing them without judgment, offering the same support each time. Nearby, a cluster of flowers leaned slightly toward one another, their petals closed part way, conserving energy. They did not need to be seen to exist. Their presence was enough. The garden understood this deeply, that worth was not measured by visibility, but by persistence. Above, the sky stretched wide and patient. Stars appeared and disappeared behind thin, passing clouds, never fully gone, just briefly hidden. Their steady distance brought a gentle perspective. Whatever had happened during the day, whatever might come with the morning, there was still this moment, still this breath, still this quiet. The soil held warmth beneath its cool surface, a reminder that even in darkness there was stored energy waiting for the right time. Kneeling near the plants, one could feel it through fingertips, a subtle hum of life moving slowly, steadily forward. Nothing rushed, nothing panicked. In this hidden garden, strength did not announce itself. It arrived softly, like night air filling the lungs. It settled in the body without words, easing the weight just enough to make rest possible. And in that ease, something gentle began to return, a sense of balance, fragile but real. As the night edged forward, the garden seemed to deepen its silence, not by removing sound, but by softening it even more. The air felt thicker now, gently cool, resting against the skin like a light blanket. Breathing slowed without effort, as if the body remembered an older rhythm, one that existed before urgency and alarms. A faint breeze passed through the taller plants, causing a slow wave of movement that traveled from leaf to leaf. It was unhurried, deliberate, and calming to watch. Each stem bent slightly, then returned to its place, resilient without strain. The motion carried a quiet lesson. Flexibility did not mean weakness, only survival. Along the edge of the garden, small stones formed an uneven border. Some were chipped, some smooth, each different from the next. Yet together they held the soil in place. In the low light they seemed to glow faintly, warmed by the day and cooled by the night, balanced between what had been and what was still to come. The scent of the garden shifted subtly as the hours passed. What had once been bright and green grew deeper, more earthy. It was the smell of roots and patience, of life continuing below the surface, unseen but steady. With every breath, it felt easier to let go of thoughts that circled too tightly, easing them into the background. Somewhere nearby, a distant sound echoed briefly, then faded. The garden accepted it without tension, allowing it to pass through without disturbance. Nothing here clung too tightly, not to noise, not to worry, not even to time itself. In this space, the night felt like a gentle companion rather than something to endure. It wrapped itself around the garden, encouraging rest, encouraging stillness, and in that stillness something subtle but powerful took root, a quiet trust that even in the most difficult places calm could be found. As the night slowly unfolded, the garden seemed to settle even deeper into itself. The shadows grew longer, stretching gently across the ground, never sharp, never threatening. They rested among the plants like quiet companions, sharing the space without asking for attention. A single leaf detached from its branch and drifted downward, turning softly in the air before resting on the soil. The sound it made was barely there, a whisper of arrival. Nothing startled, nothing reacted. The garden accepted the moment as it was, complete and unremarkable, in the most comforting way. Near the far corner, the young tree stood still, its roots firm beneath the surface. Though small, it carried a quiet confidence shaped by wind, weather, and careful patience. Its presence felt reassuring, as if it were silently promising that growth did not need to be fast to be meaningful. The air carried a faint coolness now, brushing against cheeks and hands with a clarity that felt refreshing rather than cold. Each breath seemed cleaner, slower, easier to follow. With every exhale, tension slipped away, dissolving into the dark, where it no longer demanded attention. Time felt generous here. It expanded, creating space for stillness, for rest, for thoughts to drift without urgency. The hospital beyond the garden continued its endless rhythm, but it felt far away now, like something remembered rather than endured. In this hidden place, the night offered a quiet gift, the chance to be present without effort, to rest without guilt, and to trust that even in the shadow of hardship, gentle moments could still exist. A subtle change moved through the garden, almost imperceptible at first. The night air shifted, carrying a hint of approaching dawn, though the sky remained dark. It was a quiet transition, the kind that happened without announcement, felt more in the body than seen by the eyes. The plants responded in their own silent way. Leaves adjusted their angle slightly, releasing tiny drops of moisture that slid down stems, and disappeared into the soil below. The earth accepted them patiently, storing what it needed, letting the rest soak away. Nothing was wasted here. Everything had a place. Sitting in the garden during this hour felt different. The stillness was deeper, more complete, as if the world itself were resting between breaths. Thoughts slowed even further, stretching out and settling gently, no longer pressing for answers. There was comfort in not knowing what came next, in simply being held by the moment. The bench creaked softly when weight shifted, a small sound that felt grounding rather than intrusive. It was a reminder of presence, of being here now. The wood held the warmth of earlier visitors, traces of shared stillness, layered over time. Somewhere above, the clouds thinned just enough to allow a few stars to shine more clearly. Their light was faint but steady, reaching down without effort. It felt reassuring, like a quiet acknowledgement that even from far away, something was watching, something remained constant. The garden continued its gentle vigil, offering calm without condition. It did not hurry the night away, nor did it cling to it. It simply existed, steady and patient, ready to welcome whatever came next. The first signs of morning were still far off, but the garden seemed to sense the coming change. The air held a new softness, a subtle lightness that had nothing to do with brightness and everything to do with release. Night had done its work here, easing burdens, quieting minds, and now it lingered gently, unafraid of what followed. A faint mist hovered low to the ground, barely visible, curling around stones and stems like a careful visitor. It cooled the skin when brushed against, refreshing and calm. Each breath drew it in, smooth and clean, carrying a sense of renewal without expectation. The path through the garden looked different now. In the low light, it appeared less worn, its edges softened by shadow and moisture. Walking, it felt like moving through a memory, familiar yet lighter, as if some of the weight had been set down along the way. Near the fence, a small cluster of leaves trembled, responding to the slightest breeze. Their movement was gentle and unforced, a quiet conversation with the air. Nothing rushed, nothing resisted. The garden understood the value of cooperation, of yielding just enough to remain whole. In the distance, a muted sound rose and fell, then faded again. It no longer startled. The garden had created a buffer, a space where even reminders of struggle arrived softened and manageable. Here, the body remembered how to rest deeply, how to exist without constant alertness. As the night continued its slow retreat, the garden remained steady, holding onto its calm, offering it freely. It asked nothing in return, trusting that those who found it would carry its quiet strength with them when they eventually returned to the world beyond. The garden lingered in that gentle in-between, where night had not yet let go and morning had not yet arrived. The sky above shifted in tone, barely noticeable, a soft deepening that hinted at change without urgency. Everything moved slowly here, honoring the calm that had settled so completely. Dew now coated the leaves more fully, gathering along their edges before falling in quiet drops to the soil below. Each drop landed without sound, absorbed instantly, as if the earth had been waiting for it. The ground felt cool and supportive beneath bare hands, holding a steady temperature that invited stillness. A sense of quiet companionship filled the space. The plants stood together, different in shape and size, yet united by the same purpose: to grow, to endure, to remain. Their presence offered a wordless reassurance that survival did not need to be loud or dramatic to be real. The bench, slightly damp now, held the memory of rest without asking for more. Sitting there, one could feel the faint chill of morning approaching, not as discomfort, but as clarity. It sharpened awareness gently, reminding the body it was alive, awake, and capable of continuing. Somewhere beyond the garden, the hospital's rhythm shifted slightly, preparing for a new cycle. Yet here, there was no rush to follow. The garden allowed the moment to stretch, to remain full and unbroken, a final deep breath before the day. As light slowly gathered beyond the horizon, the garden stayed rooted in calm, carrying the quiet strength of the night forward, ready to offer it again whenever it was needed. The earliest light of morning arrived not as brightness, but as a soft thinning of darkness. The garden noticed first. Shadows loosened their hold, edges becoming less defined, blending gently into one another. Nothing ended abruptly. Everything transitioned with care. The air felt cooler now, fresh with the promise of a new day. Each breath carried a quiet clarity, as if the lungs were being gently rinsed clean. The sense of earth and leaves remained, but they lifted slightly, becoming lighter, more open. Tiny movements began to stir. A leaf shifted position, releasing a final drop of dew. A stem straightened just a little, responding to the subtle change in light. These were not awakenings, but continuations, life flowing onward without pause. The path through the garden reflected the faint glow of the sky, stones catching hints of pale color. Walking it felt grounding, each step deliberate and calm. The soil no longer felt heavy with night, but supportive, ready to hold the day as it had held the dark. From the bench, the view had changed. The outlines of plants became clearer, revealing textures and details hidden before. Veins in leaves, small imperfections in petals, evidence of resilience rather than flaw. The garden did not aim for perfection. It thrived in honesty. Behind it all, the hospital prepared to greet morning, its distant sounds returning slowly. Yet the garden remained a place apart, holding on to its quiet strength, offering a gentle bridge between rest and return. Morning continued to arrive in careful layers. The light grew a shade warmer, spreading softly across the garden without disturbing its calm. Dew shimmered briefly, then faded, leaving leaves refreshed and steady. The night had given what it could, and now it released the space without resistance. A bird passed overhead unseen, its wings making a faint whisper against the air. The sound was brief and gentle, like a passing thought that didn't need to linger. The garden accepted it and returned to its quiet, unbothered by small interruptions. The soil, dark and rich, seemed to breathe more openly now. Warmth rose slowly from beneath, meeting the cool air above. Kneeling close, one could feel that balance, night and day meeting softly, neither rushing the other. It felt reassuring, this cooperation between opposites. The plants held their posture with ease. Some leaned toward the growing light, others remained relaxed in their shadows. There was no competition here, no urgency to outshine. Each thing grew in its own way, at its own pace, confident that there was enough space, enough time. The bench dried gradually as the air warmed. Sitting there, it felt easier to imagine returning to movement, to responsibility, to the world beyond the garden. Not yet, but soon. The thought did not feel heavy. It felt possible. The garden remained what it had always been, quiet, steady, and generous. It did not ask anyone to stay. It simply offered a moment of calm strong enough to carry forward. The morning settled in fully now, not loud or demanding, but present. Light filtered through the leaves in soft patterns, resting on the ground like gentle brush strokes. The garden revealed more of itself, each detail unfolding slowly, as if there were no need to hurry. Colors deepened as the sky brightened. Greens grew richer, petals showed subtle shades that had been hidden in the dark. Nothing looked new exactly, just clearer, more honest in the daylight. The garden wore its imperfections openly, and in doing so felt more real, more comforting. A breeze moved through again, lighter this time, carrying with it the scent of fresh air and damp soil. It brushed against the skin and passed on, leaving behind a quiet sense of alertness without tension. The body responded naturally, stretching inward, preparing gently for what the day might ask. From this angle, the hospital behind the garden looked less harsh. Morning light softened its edges, turning sharp lines into something almost gentle. The contrast between the two spaces remained, but it felt less severe now, as if the garden had lent some of its calm to the building beyond. The path waited, clear and steady, leading back toward duty and movement. Yet it did not pull. It simply existed, ready when needed. Standing at its edge, one could feel both gratitude for the pause and a quiet readiness to continue. The garden, unchanged in its purpose, continued to stand quietly behind the hospital, offering rest without conditions and hope without noise. As the day grew more defined, the garden settled into a gentle steadiness. The early light no longer searched. It rested. Shadows shortened and gathered close to stems and stones, no longer stretching, no longer uncertain. Everything felt placed, as if the world had quietly agreed on where things belonged. A soft warmth began to rise from the ground, easing into the air. It was not heat, just comfort, the kind that invites the body to loosen without effort. Hands felt lighter, breaths felt fuller. Even the silence felt friendly, shaped by daylight rather than guarded by night. Tiny signs of care appeared everywhere. A stake supporting a leaning plant, a strip of cloth tied loosely around a stem, allowing it to grow without strain. These small acts spoke of patience and intention, of someone choosing to tend rather than control. The garden responded in kind, thriving not through force, but through attention. From time to time, a distant sound from the hospital drifted in. Voices, movement, life continuing. They arrived gently now, no longer sharp. The garden seemed to meet them halfway, absorbing their edges, reminding the listener that even busy sounds could coexist with calm. Standing still among the plants, it was easier to sense a quiet readiness within, not urgency, not pressure. Just the simple understanding that rest had been taken and strength had returned in its own subtle way. The garden remained behind, unchanged, waiting without expectation. It knew that those who left would carry something with them, a slower breath, a steadier step, a reminder that calm could be found again. By mid-morning, the garden held a different kind of quiet, one shaped by clarity rather than stillness. The air was brighter now, carrying warmth that settled gently on leaves and skin alike. Nothing felt rushed. The garden had already done its work, and now it simply remained steady and present. Light gathered in small pockets between branches, creating places where one could stand and feel held by warmth. The soil released a clean, comforting scent as it dried, grounding and familiar. Each step along the path felt sure, supported, as if the earth itself were quietly encouraging forward movement. The plant stood with relaxed confidence. Some blossoms opened a little wider, others remained modestly closed. There was no expectation for uniformity here, Each form followed its own rhythm, trusting that it was enough just to be. The bench, now dry and warmed by the sun, no longer felt like a place only for rest. It felt like a place for reflection, a pause that made sense before returning to responsibility. Sitting there, it was easier to notice how the body felt stronger, calmer, more balanced than before. Beyond the garden, the day continued to unfold. Yet the hidden space remained untouched by urgency. It offered a final moment of quiet, not as an escape, but as preparation, a gentle reminder that strength could be soft and endurance could be calm. The garden did not close itself off as the day advanced. It stayed open, ready, patient, knowing it would be needed again. As the sun climbed a little higher, the garden settled into a calm rhythm of its own. Light and shadow shared the space evenly now, neither competing nor dominating. Leaves held the warmth without strain, and the air moved just enough to keep everything feeling alive and awake. There was a sense of quiet confidence here, as if the garden knew it would endure the long hours ahead. It did not cling to the stillness of night or the softness of early morning. It adapted gently, accepting the day as it came. That acceptance felt soothing, like permission to do the same. A faint hum of life surrounded the space, small movements, subtle sounds, nothing demanding attention. The world beyond the garden felt present but distant, like a memory that no longer carried weight. Here, focus narrowed naturally, settling on simple sensations. The feel of sunlight on skin, the texture of bark beneath resting fingers, the steady rise and fall of breath. Standing near the path again, there was no hesitation now. The pause had been enough. Rest had done its quiet work. The body felt ready, not energized in a sharp way, but supported, grounded, capable of continuing. Behind it all, the garden remained unchanged in its purpose. It did not measure who came or how long they stayed. It simply offered what it always had: space to breathe, space to recover, space to remember that even close to struggle, something gentle could continue to grow. The garden held the late morning with an easy steadiness. The light had grown fuller, but it remained soft, filtered through layers of leaves that shaped it into something kind. Nothing glared, nothing overwhelmed. The warmth rested quietly, like a reassuring hand placed gently on the shoulder. Petals shifted slightly as the air moved, opening and closing just enough to remain comfortable. The plants seemed to understand balance instinctively, never taking more than they needed. Their calm cooperation gave the space a sense of harmony, as though everything was quietly agreeing to coexist. The path through the garden looked inviting now, clearly defined, yet unpressured. Walking it felt natural, unforced, each step falling into place without thought. The stones no longer felt uneven. They felt familiar, part of a rhythm learned over time. From this vantage point, the garden appeared larger than it truly was. Perhaps it was the way it held so much calm within a small space, or the way it made time feel generous. It had a quiet depth, one that did not depend on size or perfection. Beyond the leaves, the hospital continued its steady pulse. The contrast remained, but it felt less heavy now. The garden had softened it, offering a buffer of green and patience between urgency and rest. Here, standing in the calm light, it was easier to trust that returning to responsibility did not mean losing this peace. The garden had shown that calm could be carried gently and quietly into whatever came next. As the day moved onward, the garden settled into a quiet endurance that felt reassuring. The sun traced a slow arc overhead, and the light shifted gently across the ground, changing angles without changing mood. Leaves caught the brightness and softened it, turning it into something restful rather than demanding. The air held a steady warmth now, comfortable and familiar. It wrapped around the body without effort, encouraging slow movement and easy presence. Standing still among the plants, it was possible to feel time passing without feeling pressed by it, as if each moment were allowed its full shape. Small details drew attention: the fine lines on a leaf, the subtle curve of a stem reaching just slightly toward the light, the way soil cracked gently as it dried. These were not signs of strain, but of natural adjustment. The garden adapted quietly, showing that change did not always require struggle. From somewhere beyond the fence came a faint echo of voices carried by the breeze. They arrived softened, distant, no longer sharp. The garden received them and let them drift away, keeping its calm intact. It reminded anyone listening that not every sound needed a response. In this steady daylight, the sense of restoration lingered. Rest had already happened, and now it remained as a quiet foundation. Strength felt settled, not urgent, ready but patient. The garden continued to stand behind the hospital, unassuming and resilient, offering its calm freely, confident that it would be found again when needed. The garden entered the long stretch of day with a quiet patience. Light rested evenly now, neither climbing nor fading, simply being. Shadows gathered beneath leaves and along stones, forming cool pockets that offered gentle relief from the warmth. The space felt balanced, as though it had found a comfortable middle and decided to stay there. A faint rustle passed through the taller plants as the breeze shifted direction. It moved slowly, thoughtfully, touching each stem in turn before drifting on. The sound it left behind was soft and familiar, like the turning of a page. Nothing new demanded attention. Nothing old needed to be held. The soil showed fine lines where moisture had evaporated, delicate patterns that told a quiet story of time passing. They were not cracks of damage, but marks of process, evidence that the earth was doing what it always did, adjusting, responding, continuing. Standing still, it was easy to notice how the body felt now, steady, supported, unhurried. Breath moved in and out without effort. The shoulders rested where they belonged. Even thought seemed to slow, choosing only what mattered, letting the rest drift away. The garden did not change its offering as the day advanced. It remained a place of quiet presence, holding space without expectation. Behind the hospital, behind the urgency, it continued to grow calmly, reminding anyone who found it that endurance could be gentle and peace could exist alongside effort. As afternoon approached, the garden carried the day with a calm steadiness that felt deeply reassuring. The sun warmed the stones along the path, storing its light quietly, while the shaded areas remained cool and welcoming. There was a gentle contrast everywhere, a balance that felt intentional, even comforting. The plants seemed settled now, no longer adjusting, simply existing within the rhythm of the hours. Leaves rested where they were, petals held their shape, and stems stood firm without stiffness. The garden did not strive. It trusted the slow work of time, knowing that growth did not need constant attention to continue. A subtle scent of warm earth rose into the air, rich and grounding. It lingered just long enough to be noticed, then faded again, leaving behind a sense of connection to something steady and ancient. Breathing it in felt like being reminded of one's place in a much larger, patient world. From beyond the fence, the hospital's presence was still felt, but softened by distance and light. The sounds that reached the garden were fewer now, less urgent, drifting in and out without disturbing the calm. The contrast between the two spaces remained, yet it no longer felt sharp. The garden had absorbed what it could, offering quiet resilience in return. Standing here, it became clear that this place was not meant to change the world beyond it. It was meant to support those who moved through it, even briefly. A pause, a breath, a reminder that rest and strength could exist together, quietly and without struggle. The garden remained steady and patient, holding the afternoon with the same gentle care it had offered the night before. The afternoon light softened as it settled into a slower pace. The garden responded with a deep, unhurried calm, as if it had learned long ago how to hold the middle of the day without effort. Warmth lingered in the air, not heavy, just present, wrapping gently around leaves and skin. Shadows shifted gradually, inching across the ground like quiet companions. They created cool resting places beneath the plants, spaces where the earth felt calm and shaded. Stepping into one of these pockets brought instant relief, a subtle cooling that felt grounding and kind. The path through the garden seemed almost timeless now. Its stones, warmed by the sun, held a faint heat that could be felt through the soles of the feet. Each step felt sure and stable, as if the ground itself were offering reassurance. The air carried the faintest hum of life, small movements, distant sounds, nothing demanding. Even the hospital beyond seemed to slow slightly. Its presence felt more as a backdrop than a pressure. The garden maintained its role as a quiet boundary, a place where intensity softened into something manageable. Here the mind found it easy to rest again, even in daylight. There was no need to close the eyes to feel calm. The stillness lived openly, shared generously, asking nothing in return. The garden continued its gentle vigil, holding the afternoon with patience, confident that its quiet strength would be enough for whoever found their way to it. The day leaned gently toward its later hours, and the garden followed without resistance. Light softened again, taking on a warmer tone, brushing across leaves and stones like a quiet farewell to the brightest part of the day. Nothing rushed. The change felt natural, expected, and calm. A few leaves fluttered as the breeze returned, slower now, carrying the faint scent of warmth and dust. It moved through the garden with care, touching each corner briefly before drifting on. The sound it made was barely more than a sigh, a reminder that movement did not always mean disturbance. The soil, having held the sun's warmth for hours, released it gradually. Kneeling close, one could feel that gentle heat rising, steady and reassuring. It felt like stored patience, offered back slowly, without demand. The ground had done its work, and now it rested, just as the garden encouraged others to do. Shadows lengthened once more, stretching quietly across the path. They did not darken the space. They softened it, inviting reflection. In their presence, thoughts became quieter, more spacious, as if there were no need to hold on to anything too tightly. Beyond the fence, the hospital continued its rhythm, unchanged in purpose, yet the garden remained constant, offering a different kind of care, one made of silence, balance, and gentle continuity. As the afternoon eased toward evening, the garden stayed open and patient, ready to receive the calm of night again, just as it had before. The light thinned as evening approached, turning softer and more forgiving. The garden seemed to welcome this shift, relaxing into the cooler air as the warmth of the day slowly released its hold. Leaves no longer reached upward. They rested where they were, content, as if settling into a familiar posture. The breeze carried a different tone now, cooler, quieter, edged with the promise of night. It moved gently through the plants, stirring them just enough to remind the garden it was still awake. The sound was low and steady, like a breath taken after a long day. Colors deepened as the sun lowered. Greens grew darker and richer, shadows pooling softly at the base of stems and stones. The path through the garden looked calmer now, its edges less defined, encouraging slower steps and lingering pauses. Standing still, it was easy to feel the body respond to the change. Muscles softened. Breathing slowed. The day's quiet work held tension, steady focus, gentle endurance, began to unwind on its own. There was no signal telling it to happen. It simply did. From beyond the fence, the hospital's sounds shifted once more, preparing for another long night. But here, in the garden, the transition felt smooth and kind. The space held on to its calm, ready to offer it again just as the first stars prepared to return. As dusk settled fully, the garden grew quieter, not from absence, but from ease. The sky dimmed into gentle layers of blue and gray, and the first hints of evening coolness rested softly on the skin. It felt like the day exhaling, releasing what it no longer needed to carry. Small points of light appeared one by one above the garden, faint and patient. They did not demand attention. They simply arrived, steady and calm, reminding the space how to slow again. Leaves caught what little light remained, holding it briefly before letting it go. The air cooled enough to feel refreshing, inviting deeper breaths. Each inhale felt clearer now, each exhale lighter. The body followed without instruction, loosening naturally, responding to the quiet invitation of night returning. Shadows deepened gently, gathering beneath the plants and along the fence. They felt familiar, no longer something to notice or question. The garden had known them before and welcomed them back without hesitation. Behind the hospital, this hidden place prepared once more for its nighttime role. It did not change itself. It simply returned to stillness, ready to offer rest, pause, and quiet strength to anyone who stepped into its care again. Night settled over the garden like a soft covering, smooth and unbroken. The last traces of daylight slipped away quietly, leaving behind a calm darkness that felt familiar rather than uncertain. The garden seemed to recognize this hour, easing back into the rhythm it knew best. The air cooled further, brushing gently against skin with a clarity that felt refreshing. Scents deepened. Earth, leaves, faint traces of flowers, blending into something grounding and steady. Each breath drew the night inward, calm and even. Moonlight returned, pale and gentle, settling across the garden in soft patches. It traced the edges of leaves and stones, revealing just enough to guide the eye without asking it to focus. The path became a series of quiet hints rather than clear lines, encouraging slow, careful steps. Sounds from beyond the fence softened once more, losing their sharpness as the night absorbed them. The hospital continued its work, steady and necessary, but the garden held firm to its quiet purpose, offering balance where it could. Standing here now, the sense of rest deepened again, familiar and welcoming. The garden did not promise escape. It promised presence, a place to be, to breathe, and to gather quiet strength before continuing. The night grew fuller, settling into a steady calm that felt unbroken and complete. The garden rested beneath the moon, its shape softened by silver light and shadow. Nothing moved quickly. Even the air seemed to drift rather than flow, carrying coolness gently from one leaf to the next. Moisture returned to the ground in quiet ways. Dew formed again along the edges of petals and blades of grass, collecting patiently before slipping back into the soil. The earth received it without sound, continuing its slow work beneath the surface, unseen but constant. The bench stood quietly at the center, cool now, offering stillness without invitation or demand. Sitting there felt natural, as if the night itself had made space for it. Breathing slowed again, deep and unforced, following the rhythm the garden set so effortlessly. Above, clouds passed in thin layers, briefly veiling the moon before drifting on. The light dimmed and returned, never fully leaving. The change felt gentle, like a hand passing over closed eyes, encouraging rest rather than alertness. Beyond the fence, the world continued its necessary motion. But here, the night held steady. The garden remained what it had always been, patient, resilient, quietly alive, offering its calm freely, asking only that those who entered allow themselves to receive it. The garden listened as the night deepened, its stillness becoming more profound, more settled. The moon climbed higher, and with it came a softer light, less reflective, more embracing. Shadows rested where they belonged, no longer shifting, as if they had finally found their places. The air carried a gentle coolness now, steady and reassuring. Each breath felt slower than the last, unhurried, complete. The body responded without thought, settling into a calm that did not need explanation. Muscles loosened, the mind quieted, no longer searching. A faint sound, perhaps a distant call, perhaps only the wind, passed briefly through the space, then faded. The garden accepted it and returned to silence, holding its calm like a steady flame that did not flicker. Leaves brushed softly against one another, a low whisper that felt almost intentional, like reassurance shared between living things. The earth beneath remained solid and patient, grounding everything above it. Nothing here asked to be different. Nothing resisted the moment. In this hour, the garden felt timeless. Night no longer felt like a transition, but a place of rest in itself. The hospital behind it continued its vigil, unseen but present, while the garden stood quietly in balance, holding peace where it could, offering rest where it was needed. The night reached a depth where time seemed to soften around the garden. Moments stretched gently, no longer measured by clocks or schedules, but by breath and stillness. The moon's light grew more diffuse, spreading evenly across leaves and stones, turning edges smooth and indistinct. The air felt cool and clean, settling into the lungs with ease. Each inhale arrived quietly, each exhale left without effort. The body followed this rhythm naturally, slowing until even thoughts felt lighter, drifting rather than forming. A thin layer of mist began to gather once more near the ground, curling softly around the base of plants. It moved without urgency, reshaping itself with every slight shift in air. Watching it felt calming, like observing something that had nowhere else to be. The garden held its shape, familiar and comforting. Even in near darkness, it felt known. Paths remembered footsteps. The bench remembered rest. The soil remembered care. Everything carried traces of what had passed through, holding them gently without burden. Beyond the fence, the hospital remained awake, steady in its purpose. But here, the garden stood as a quiet counterpoint, offering softness where there was strain, patience where there was urgency. In this deep hour of night, the garden rested fully in itself, confident that its calm would continue to be enough. The garden remained wrapped in that deep, unbroken quiet, where the night felt settled and complete. The mist near the ground thinned slowly, lifting just enough to reveal the dark soil beneath, still and patient. Nothing hurried its departure. It simply changed as everything here did, gently and without resistance. Moonlight rested lightly on the leaves, no longer bright, just present. It revealed the garden in fragments, a curve of a stem, the edge of a stone, the soft outline of the bench. The rest remained in shadow, inviting trust rather than sight. It felt comforting to not see everything at once, to let the mind relax its need for clarity. The air cooled a little more, crisp and clean. Each breath felt deliberate, full, as if the lungs were grateful for the space. The body responded by sinking deeper into stillness, releasing the last traces of the day's effort. Even the quiet felt layered now, rich and complete. Somewhere beyond, a distant sound rose and faded, barely touching the edges of awareness. It did not interrupt. It passed through like a memory, leaving the calm untouched. The garden held its center, steady and composed. In this hour, the garden felt like a pause held open by intention, a place where nothing needed to happen, and that was enough. It waited quietly, confident in its purpose, offering rest simply by being what it was. The night carried on with a gentle certainty, as if it knew exactly how long it intended to stay. The garden rested within it, unchanged and unbothered, holding its quiet like a secret kept with care. The air felt smooth now, cool but not cold, settling evenly across skin and leaves alike. A soft stillness spread through the space, deeper than before. It was the kind that arrived after everything unnecessary had already fallen away. No more adjustments, no more waiting, just presence. The garden seemed to exist in this stillness effortlessly, as though it had been shaped for it. The soil beneath felt firm and reassuring, holding the weight of roots and stones without complaint. Beneath the surface, life continued its slow, invisible work, drawing nutrients, storing strength, preparing quietly for what would come next. Nothing rushed. Nothing feared the future. The bench remained where it was, steady and familiar. Sitting there now felt like being held by the night itself. Breathing grew so gentle it was barely noticeable, rising and falling in perfect rhythm with the calm around it. Above, the sky remained wide and patient, clouds drifting lazily across the moon without urgency. Light dimmed and returned, never fully gone, never fully demanded. The garden accepted each change with ease, teaching the quiet lesson that not everything needed to be fixed or understood. In this deep hour, the garden simply existed, strong in its stillness, generous in its calm, offering rest without words, and peace without conditions. The night lingered, unhurried and gentle, as if it understood the value of staying a little longer. The garden remained settled within it, every leaf and stone resting in quiet agreement. There was no sense of waiting for morning, only an acceptance of the present moment as enough. The air carried a faint coolness that felt clean and restorative. Each breath seemed to move through the body with purpose, loosening what little tension remained. The mind grew quieter still, thoughts drifting farther apart, leaving wide spaces of calm in between. Moonlight thinned as clouds gathered briefly, softening the glow until it felt like an echo rather than a presence. The garden did not resist the dimming. It trusted the dark, knowing it had held it before and would do so again. The path through the garden seemed almost invisible now, known more by memory than as sight, and yet it felt reassuring, its direction certain, even without light. It reminded the body that it could move forward even when everything was not fully clear. Beyond the fence, the hospital continued its work, unseen but steady. Here, the garden remained a quiet counterbalance, offering stillness where there was effort, rest where there was strain. In this hour, the garden asked nothing. It simply remained, confident that its calm presence was enough to carry through the night. The quiet deepened again, settling into the garden like a familiar weight that felt comforting rather than heavy. The air grew still, holding its coolness gently, as if afraid to disturb the balance it had found. Even the smallest movement slowed, choosing rest over motion. Somewhere within the soil, roots pressed a little deeper, unseen and patient. Their work continued without sound or urgency, drawing strength from darkness, trusting the slow passage of time. The garden seemed to mirror this effort above ground, nothing visible changing, yet everything quietly preparing. The bench felt almost part of the earth now, steady and grounded. Sitting there, it was easy to forget where the body ended and the night began. Breathing blended with the air. Stillness blended with thought. Boundaries softened until there was only calm awareness. A distant sound drifted briefly through the space and faded again, leaving no trace. The garden did not hold on to it. It allowed the silence to return, complete and unbroken, like a smooth surface settling after a ripple. Above, the sky remained wide and patient. The moon slipped behind a veil of clouds, dimming the light without removing it entirely. The garden accepted the change, trusting the dark to hold what could not be seen. In this hour, nothing asked to be different. The garden rested in quiet certainty, offering its calm freely, confident that rest itself was doing important work. The night felt settled into its deepest calm, a gentle stillness that wrapped the garden completely. The air was cool and steady, no longer shifting, as if it had found the perfect balance and chosen to remain there. Each breath moved slowly, quietly, without effort, blending into the silence around it. The plant stood motionless now, resting in the dark. Leaves no longer whispered, stems no longer adjusted. Everything seemed to trust the night fully, allowing itself to pause without fear of what might come next. The garden did not need to watch or listen anymore. It simply was. The soil held its quiet warmth beneath the surface, a hidden comfort. Beneath it, life continued in gentle rhythms, roots, moisture, and time working together patiently. Nothing rushed toward morning, nothing resisted the darkness. Both were welcome here. The bench felt solid and reassuring, like a constant presence that asked nothing and offered support without words. Sitting there, it was easy to feel anchored, connected to the ground, and the calm surrounding it. Thoughts softened into sensations, and sensations softened into rest. Beyond the fence, the hospital remained awake, carrying its long vigil through the night. Yet the garden held its own quiet purpose, standing as a reminder that even near hardship, deep rest could still exist. In this moment, the garden rested fully in the night, confident and complete, holding silence gently and offering peace without conditions. The night seemed to pause with the garden, as if both had agreed to remain exactly as they were for a little while longer. The darkness felt smooth now, settled and familiar, like a quiet room after the door has been gently closed. Nothing pressed in, nothing pulled away. The air cooled just enough to feel refreshing with each breath. It moved slowly in and out of the lungs, steady and complete, carrying away the last traces of effort from the body. Muscles softened further, releasing into stillness without needing to be told. Moonlight returned in faint pieces as clouds shifted, laying thin ribbons of silver across the ground. They rested on leaves and stones briefly, then drifted on again. The garden accepted these changes without reaction, trusting the rhythm of the night to unfold, as it always did. The path, barely visible now, felt more like an idea than a shape. And yet it remained certain. Even without seeing it, there was a sense of knowing where it led. The garden seemed to offer that same reassurance. Direction did not disappear just because it could not be seen. Everything here felt held. The soil held roots. The night held the garden. The garden held quiet for anyone who needed it. Nothing was asked. Nothing was required. Rest simply happened, naturally and completely. The night carried on, steady and unbroken, like a long, gentle breath. The garden remained at ease within it. Every part settled into a quiet understanding. There was no sense of waiting anymore, only the calm acceptance of being exactly where it was meant to be. The air felt smooth and balanced, cool enough to refresh, warm enough to comfort. Each inhale arrived slowly. Each exhale drifted away just as gently. Breathing no longer felt like an action, but like a natural extension of the stillness itself. The plants rested deeply now, their shapes blended into the darkness, no longer needing to be distinct. Leaves, stems, and soil became part of one continuous presence, united by silence. The garden no longer felt like many things together, but like one calm, breathing whole. The bench remained a quiet anchor, grounded and patient. Sitting there felt effortless, as if gravity itself had softened. The body seemed to settle downward, not with heaviness, but with trust, releasing the need to hold itself alert. Beyond the fence, the distant world continued its quiet persistence. But here, that effort felt far away, almost abstract. The garden held a different truth, that rest was not absence, but restoration, happening slowly and invisibly. In this deep hour, the garden offered nothing new and needed nothing in return. Its calm simply continued, steady and complete, holding space for peace to deepen even further. The night seemed to stretch, not in length but in softness. The garden remained suspended in a gentle quiet, as if time itself had learned how to move more slowly here. The darkness was no longer something to notice. It had become a background presence, calm and reliable. The air felt settled and smooth, carrying a faint coolness that encouraged stillness. Each breath flowed easily, barely stirring the silence. The body followed along, sinking deeper into rest, letting go of the small tensions it hadn't realized it was still holding. Somewhere beneath the soil, moisture shifted almost imperceptibly, guided by gravity and patience. Roots remained steady, drawing what they needed without urgency. This unseen work continued quietly, a reminder that even in rest, life moved forward in its own gentle way. The garden felt whole now, complete in itself. Nothing needed adjusting, nothing waited to begin. The bench, the path, the plants, and the night all existed in calm agreement, holding the space together without effort. Beyond the fence, the hospital carried on, its lights glowing faintly in the distance. But here, The garden maintained its quiet balance, offering a deep, steady calm that felt strong enough to last. The night leaned in closer, not to intrude but to shelter. The garden felt cradled now, held within a calm that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The air was still, cool, and gentle, resting against the skin like a familiar presence that needed no acknowledgement. Shadows merged softly, losing their edges until they became part of the same quiet whole. The shapes of leaves and stones mattered less now than the feeling they created together, steady, grounded, safe. The garden no longer asked the senses to notice details. It invited them to rest. Breathing grew even slower, deeper, as if guided by the earth itself. Each inhale arrived smoothly. Each exhale released without effort. The body responded by sinking further into comfort, trusting the stillness completely. The soil beneath remained patient and strong, holding everything without strain. Beneath the surface, life continued its subtle rhythms, unseen and unhurried. The garden seemed to draw strength from this quiet persistence, from the knowledge that rest and growth were not opposites, but partners. Beyond the fence, the world continued its long night. But here, in this hidden space, calm gathered and stayed, offering a sense of completion, as though nothing more was required in this moment. The quiet held steady, deep and unbroken, like a calm lake under a clouded sky. The garden seemed to rest not just in the night, but within itself. Every part settled into a shared stillness. There was no sense of movement now, only a gentle awareness that everything was exactly where it needed to be. The air felt cool and clean, almost weightless. It moved in and out of the lungs without sound, without effort, as if breathing itself had become optional, something the body could do simply because it felt safe enough to slow down. Thoughts softened further, loosening their edges, drifting until they became little more than feelings. Moonlight faded behind thicker clouds, leaving the garden wrapped in a deeper shade. Yet nothing felt lost. The darkness felt supportive, like a soft covering pulled up just enough to keep warmth in. The path, the bench, the plants all remained present, even when unseen. The ground beneath felt solid and trustworthy, holding everything gently. Roots rested, stones stayed where they were. The garden carried a quiet confidence shaped by patience and time, reminding anyone within it that stability did not need constant attention to remain strong. In this hour, the garden offered its deepest gift, complete permission to rest. Nothing to solve, nothing to prepare. Just this moment held gently, calm and whole. A subtle change moved through the night, so gentle it was felt more than noticed. The garden seemed to inhale together as if preparing for something familiar and welcome. The darkness softened further, no longer deepening, simply resting in place. The air grew slightly lighter, carrying a quiet hint of early morning far beyond the horizon. It did not disturb the calm. Instead, it blended into it, like a whisper, reminding the garden that cycles continued, even while rest remained complete. The soil held its warmth carefully, sharing it upward in small, steady measures. Beneath the surface, roots remained still, patient, trusting the rhythm they had always known. Above, leaves rested in silence, content to remain just as they were for a while longer. Breathing felt slow and natural, almost unnoticed. The body seemed to float within the calm, neither fully awake nor fully asleep, held gently between effort and release. Thoughts no longer formed clearly. They softened into sensations: cool air, steady ground, quiet presence. The garden stood quietly behind the hospital, unchanged and unwavering. It had offered its stillness generously, and now it simply remained, confident that what it had given was enough to carry through whatever came next. The night reached its final, gentlest moment, like a deep breath slowly released. The garden remained perfectly still, holding the calm it had gathered through hours of quiet patience. Nothing stirred, nothing asked for attention. The world felt paused in a way that was kind and complete. The air carried a faint promise of morning, barely there, just a softness at the edge of awareness. It did not pull the garden forward. It simply rested beside it, allowing the last moments of night to be full and unbroken. Coolness and warmth balanced gently, meeting in a place that felt safe and steady. The bench, the path, the soil, and the plants all seemed to share the same quiet understanding. They had done what they were meant to do, held stillness, offered rest, absorbed weight, and returned calm. Nothing more was required of them now. Breathing slowed to its deepest rhythm, so natural it no longer felt like an action. The body felt supported from beneath, surrounded by silence, carried by the gentle certainty that rest had truly happened. Whatever lay ahead no longer felt heavy. It felt manageable, softened by this quiet pause. Behind the battlefield hospital, unseen by most, the hidden garden remained exactly as it was, steady, resilient, and quietly alive, ready to offer its calm again whenever it was needed. Thank you for spending this quiet time here, resting in the stillness of the hidden garden. If your eyes are growing heavy, allow yourself to drift gently toward sleep, carrying this calm with you. If you found comfort in this story, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing where you listened from and what time it was for you. May your night be peaceful, your rest deep, and your tomorrow gentle.